There's something about Hollywood that seems to blur the line between glamour and the supernatural. Beneath the glitz, the fame, and the endless lights, there are dark stories whispered about spirits that never left. And one of the eeriest of them all comes from Johnny Depp, a man known for playing haunted characters on screen, who once found himself face-to-face with something he couldn't explain in real life. It all began in the early 1990s, at a time when Depp was quickly becoming one of Hollywood's most mysterious and magnetic actors. Fresh off his success in Edward Scissorhands and Cry Baby, he had already gained a reputation for being drawn to dark, eccentric roles. But his fascination with the macabre wasn't just limited to acting. It followed him into his personal life. Depp had long admitted that he was obsessed with the supernatural, collecting odd artifacts, antique dolls, and even items said to be haunted. But as he would soon discover, curiosity can open doors best left closed. Johnny was living in a historic Hollywood Hills mansion at the time, a sprawling Spanish-style home that had once belonged to several old Hollywood stars. The house itself had an unsettling energy. It was the kind of place that seemed to breathe, the walls creaking in the dead of night, as if remembering old conversations. Depp had bought it because of its character, its history, and its isolation from the chaos of Hollywood Boulevard. But almost immediately after moving in, he began to sense something wasn't right. In interviews, Depp has described nights when he would wake up suddenly, feeling like someone was in the room with him. At first, he brushed it off as paranoia. The mind plays tricks when you're alone in a massive house filled with echoes and shadows. But soon, it became harder to ignore. Doors would open on their own, objects would be moved from one place to another, and cold spots would appear in the hallways even when the LA heat outside was unbearable. One night, as the story goes, Depp was reading in bed when he heard footsteps outside his bedroom door, slow, deliberate, as heavy as if someone was pacing. He assumed it was his security guard checking in, but when he called out, there was no answer. The footsteps stopped. He got up to look, but the hallway was empty. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there. That same night, he reportedly saw a faint figure standing at the end of the hall, a man in what looked like 1930s-style clothing, staring at him before vanishing into thin air. Shaken, Depp started asking around about the house's past. What he found was disturbing. The mansion had been owned decades earlier by a studio executive rumored to have been involved in occult practices. Several people who had lived there after him reported strange occurrences, voices, whispers, and the unmistakable sense of being watched. One former resident even claimed they saw a man appear in the mirror, standing behind them when no one else was in the room. For a while, Depp tried to rationalize everything. He was known to be an insomniac, a night owl who often stayed up until dawn. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was his imagination running wild. But then something happened that made him believe the haunting was real. Late one evening, while preparing for a role, Depp said he heard what sounded like faint crying coming from one of the unused guest rooms upstairs. The sound was unmistakably human, soft, sorrowful, and echoing through the empty house. When he went to investigate, the room was freezing cold. The windows were shut, but his breath came out in visible clouds. In the middle of the room, a single chair had been pulled out from the wall, facing the window. He hadn't touched that chair since moving in. He left the house that night and refused to sleep there for weeks. The experiences didn't stop, even when he returned. Lights flickered for no reason, and shadows seemed to dart across rooms. Once, while hosting a few friends, one of them reportedly saw a dark shape move behind Depp during dinner. Everyone froze. But when they turned, nothing was there. The air, however, had grown icy. Depp later admitted that he felt an unseen presence lingering near him for years, sometimes even while he was away from the mansion. This wasn't the only supernatural experience Depp would claim to have. Years later, while filming The Ninth Gate, a movie about a rare book dealer who becomes entangled in a demonic mystery, crew members noted strange happenings on set. Equipment would malfunction, shadows would appear on the monitors that didn't exist in the room, and Depp himself confessed to feeling a sinister energy surrounding the project. Some say the role attracted dark forces to him again, that the veil between fiction and reality blurred too much for comfort. In another interview, Depp spoke cryptically about the paranormal, saying, "There are things in this world we'll never understand. I've seen things that made me question everything I thought I knew." He never outright called his experiences hauntings, but his words left little doubt that he believed something otherworldly had crossed his path. Fans, of course, have their theories. Some believe that the ghost he saw in his Hollywood Hills mansion was tied to the property's dark past. Others think it was a manifestation of the energy Depp surrounded himself with, his fascination with death, mystery, and the occult. After all, he has long collected objects with eerie histories: antique clown dolls, taxidermy animals, even furniture from old funeral parlors. In one rare interview, a friend of Depp's claimed that Johnny once bought an entire collection of items from a New Orleans voodoo shop, items said to carry spiritual residue. Whatever the cause, his encounters with the paranormal seem to have followed him. In 2015, while filming Black Mass in Boston, Depp allegedly told crew members that he'd felt cold spots on set and that something wasn't right in one of the old buildings they were using. A few days later, a light fixture suddenly crashed down during a quiet moment of filming, missing him by inches. The crew laughed it off, but Depp's expression reportedly said it all. He'd seen this kind of thing before. It's also worth noting that Depp's interest in haunted locations never stopped. He's spoken fondly of visiting old cemeteries, particularly in London and New Orleans, and says he feels peaceful in such places. But that peace might come from familiarity, after all. If the stories are true, he's lived much of his life surrounded by spirits. There's one final story that ties everything together. In 2003, Depp gave an interview where he mentioned a recurring dream he'd had for years, a figure standing in the corner of a room, watching him silently. The dream always ended the same way. The figure would vanish, and he'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, and unable to move for several seconds. Paranormal experts might call that sleep paralysis. Others might call it something darker, an entity attaching itself to him, feeding on fear and attention. Whether real or imagined, Depp's ghostly experiences remain part of his legend. He's one of those rare celebrities whose on-screen darkness seems to bleed into his real life, a man whose charm hides an unshakable fascination with the unknown. Even now, as he lives between islands and European estates, fans whisper that the ghost from his old Hollywood mansion might still follow him. Some visitors to his former home in the Hollywood Hills claim they can still feel a strange presence there. Realtors say the house has a hard time staying sold. Owners often move out after only a few months. Locals even call it the Depp House, not for its former owner's fame, but for the strange lights that sometimes flicker through the windows long after midnight. Maybe Johnny Depp's story is a reminder of something timeless, that Hollywood, for all its lights and illusions, is built on old land, with old energy, and old ghosts that never truly fade. Some spirits linger, drawn to the living, especially to those who acknowledge them. And perhaps that's what makes Depp different. He never tried to run from the darkness. He listened to it. He invited it in. Whether it was the spirit of an old actor, a restless entity tied to the mansion, or simply the echo of a haunted mind, no one can say for sure. But one thing is certain: Johnny Depp's ghost story stands as one of Hollywood's most chilling tales. Because sometimes, the most haunted people are the ones who've stopped pretending ghosts don't exist. And in Hollywood, where dreams and nightmares often share the same stage, maybe that's the most believable story of all.